Okay, so I'm making this video about the upcoming full moon in Scorpio. That will be happening on May 18th, so check it out. Okay, so Sam here, and talking about the upcoming full moon in Scorpio that we have on May 18th, and that will be happening in the nakshatra of Anuradha, as we can see on the chart here. And second, behind the scenes drama a little bit here. So as you can see on the chart here, this full moon is happening right as the nakshatra of Anuradha occurs, because if you go even 10 minutes earlier, the nakshatra is Vishaka. Okay, and this shift from Vishaka to Anuradha will be very important. Now, this is in the sign of Scorpio, of course, the sidereal sign of Scorpio. And you see it happens because the moon is opposite the sun. This is how you can tell that we're having a full moon. You can just look at the chart visually and see it. Sun is at 3 degrees 30 minutes of Taurus. So the moon switches to 3 degrees 20 minutes or 30 minutes of Scorpio. And that's when we have the full moon, when there's the exact opposite. Okay? And so that's the exact, what's called Purnima, or full moon. Now, of course, as I said, this is the sidereal zodiac of Vedic astrology. So if you're a Western astrologer and you're saying, what? The full moon is... Oh, actually, it is in Scorpio. No, yeah, it's actually in Scorpio also in Western astrology. So this is one of the few times where I'm not going to get bombarded with a bunch of messages that say, sorry, but it was Sagittarius. I always get these comments from people who don't know that there's a thing called the sidereal zodiac. It's like, hello, it's Sagittarius, hate to tell you. I'm like, Google sidereal zodiac. So yeah, this is that zodiac used in Vedic astrology. And this is very important. And again, I highlighted the exact degrees here because it's right at 3 degrees and 20 minutes that the moon moves from Vishaka, the previous nakshatra, to Anuradha. And so Anuradha is the nakshatra that has to do with devotion, spiritual practices, and it's literally related to Lord Krishna's devotee called Radha. And Radha was the great devotee who was very much about seeing Lord Krishna as the divine friend and seeing God as the divine friend. And all that means. It's a very beautiful difference between God as this very approachable, loving, non-judgmental influence in our life than it is looking at God as this like imposing figure, right? I've always really related to that God as divine friend energy. It's also greatly illustrated in the Bhagavad Gita, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna is like the divine friend of Lord Arjuna, or of Arjuna. What happens is Arjuna is on the battlefield, and Krishna is his friend who is driving the chariot. And actually, Lord Krishna doesn't even know, Arjuna doesn't even know that Lord Krishna is God, because throughout his whole life, Krishna has always just been Arjuna's friend. So at the time of the battle, when Arjuna is saying, oh my God, I don't want to kill all these people. I don't know if I can do it. It's only at that moment that Krishna reveals himself to Arjuna as being God. And Arjuna goes, what are you talking about? You're just Krishna. You're just my friend Krishna. And Krishna then says, do you want to see my true nature? I'm actually Bhagavan. I'm actually God himself. I'm actually an avatar of Vishnu. And you are also a divine emanation. This is who I really am, and more importantly, this is who you really are. And this is the nature of dharma and karma. It's your karma to go and perform these actions, and to perform those actions without attachment, and instead keep your mind fixed on me, on God, on Bhagavan. So you see this story of God as divine friend in many spiritual traditions. And this whole quality of that facet of God is very much personified in Anuradha. And by the way, I see people showing up. We have Rochelle, Favaloro, Chelsea, Tyler, Russell. Hey everybody, glad you're here. And the Roxanne Miller, let's go back, Sherry La Rosa, Louis Bueno, and whatnot. So Victoria. So this is a very common facet of God. Mitra is the ruler, God as divine friend. And when we see God as our greatest friend, it's very liberating, because think of how you are with your friends. I mean your true friends that you can call at the middle of the night and not be judged, not fear what you're going to disclose because you're afraid that that friend will abandon you or whatever it is. No, your great friends, the ones that you know are on your side no matter what, that's the way we should approach God. That's the way God should be in our life. It should be that deep, intimate friend like no other, that we can always turn to and know that there's no judgment, that there's no condemnation, that's always there, will always be there for us. The friend that you would call at 3 a.m. because you got a flat tire and you're in a dangerous area of town. Not many people would get out of bed and show up for that, but you have that friend that would. And you can be that friend too. Think of the people that no matter what, you'd be there for them. They could tell you anything. They could do anything, and they'd never let you down. So that's the nature of Mitra, that God as divine friend. And it's very much the nature of Radha, the most trusted devotee of Lord Krishna as well. Because those of you who have studied the Leelas of Krishna, especially in Vrindavan, where he grew up as a gopi, or as Gopala, who would take care of the cows, know that he grew up there and he was the most beautiful of all the young boys of Vrindavan, and he would play the flute. And as he grew up, all the gopis, all the girls loved Krishna, and they fantasized that he would be their husband and all of these things. And all of the gopis loved him, including Radha. But as he grew, he would teach about selflessness and seva and sacrifice and God, and create these little tests and these leelas to see how much people were imbibing his teachings, how much they were actually listening to his teachings, whether or not they were actually embodying the compassion that he was telling them to do, and the selflessness and the seva. So he would set up these tests for them to see how much they were embodying it, and a lot of it had to do with testing how much they could detach from their romantic love for him even. And to see if they would stab their fellow gopis in the back and backstab them and cheat them in order to get closer to Lord Krishna. And most of them would, but Radha wouldn't. Radha maintained a devotional quality to Krishna, which was not so passionate, which was not so full of projection and drama and selfishness and desire, kama. And so she had the same passion for Krishna, that passion of Scorpio, that romantic longing to merge. But she saw Krishna's true nature. She saw that that longing to merge was not some fantasy about a husband and all this worldly stuff. It was this longing to merge with Bhagavan, with God, with the true essence of Krishna, as Bhagavan, as God. And so when he would put those tests before the gopis, usually Radha would pass the tests and not stab her sisters in the back or do other things. Again, it wasn't literal. It was just trick each other or play games with each other in order to get closer to Krishna. She would always maintain a devotional dispassion. Anybody who's been around great gurus know this happens. I've spent a lot of time around enlightened beings and enlightened masters. In particular, I've spent a lot of time around the hugging saint Amma, who is so loving and beautiful, and everyone wants to be closer to Amma. They want to be closer to Amma. They want to get closer to her. We want to be closer to Krishna, closer to God. And what happens when we want to get closer to Amma is we push everybody else out of the way. We wind up being selfish and nasty to each other. Even though Amma has just spoken about how important it is to be selfless and how important it is to love each other and take care of each other and think of the other person as much as yourself or more than yourself, to give up, to yield, to surrender. And then 5 minutes later, as soon as she's finished saying that, and there's an opportunity for everybody to compete for the spot closest to her and to trick somebody else or push somebody else out of the way, people do it immediately. And completely in total abandonment of what she had just said. So this is typical, this is normal, because we want to get closer. And Amma understands it's not a judgment, just like Krishna understood. But he would try to use these as examples to teach his devotees to give them leelas, or activities and dramas that show them their nature. This is what happens around these divine beings. Everything that happens around them is like a mirror that shows you your nature. Right? So I'm talking about this a lot because right now is there's enormous possibility and even necessity to transform these potentially dark qualities of our mind and our selfishness and our ego into devotion. Again, as I know, I'm probably a lot of the astrology full moon in Scorpio astrology forecasts you might have heard last few days are all about moon's debilitated in Scorpio, debilitated, jealousy, pain, problems, explosions, and difficulty. And yeah, there's definitely, we look in the world now, in the US, we have all these potential draconian laws coming up. We can see all this darkness and fear and paranoia as we feel like we're very much on the edge of all kinds of dark scenarios. War drums getting pounded all over the world, the potential for war, crazy scenarios in the U.S. where having more and more state governments outlaw women's rights to choose and rolling back the clock decades on all kinds of stuff where there's a high possibility, or at least a fear, that we're heading to some more, darker times. Whereas there's also a deeper devotional possibility in all of this. And again, underneath it all, these darker qualities of Scorpio are very much fear-based, which is the darker, negative, and difficult quality of Scorpio. It's very much about deeper transformation, especially through devotion and connecting to the depth of the heart, not just the emotional triggering, not just the surface emotions where there's pain and suffering and jealousy and competition and this fear that we're not going to get our place next to God. Because the reason that the gopis were afraid and they were, trying to trick each other out of their place is because of fear. Oh my God, I better hurry up and oh my God, unless I act this way, I'm not going to get my seat next to God. I'm not going to get my exalted place. It's all fear. It's also mixed with things like unworthiness, where we remember all of our guilt and pain and are afraid that we're going to be left behind. And so transforming all of that drama and that intensity of Scorpio that's triggered by these negative images and this vulnerability is the higher promise of Scorpio. And when Scorpio can remain loving and devoted to something higher, then the transformation happens for Scorpio. In many ways, again, if you have a lot of planets in Scorpio, you'll notice that Scorpios in general, like let's say it's your ascendant or moon, or you have several planets in Scorpio, you'll know that Scorpios are some of the most loyal, devoted friends you could ever have, especially if they have planets in Anuradha. The planets in Anuradha show that Scorpios are loyal to the end. They're very loyal friends. They'll do anything for you. They'll hang in there with you. No matter what, they won't abandon you. But the reason this is so powerful is because they might handle their romantic partners or their family members or situations where they have a lot more attachment, a lot more intense emotion, and especially desire. They might handle those desire-filled relationships much differently than they handle their friendships. It's very important to understand the difference in these kinds of human interactions. We have a very different relationship with our romantic partner than we have with our friend. It's very important to ponder these kinds of things because we act like, I don't know, I just have all these emotions. No, we don't. We're very compartmentalized. And studying astrology with a lot of precision and depth is a great exercise because you get to analyze and assess all these different subtleties and nuances, whereas before you're just kind of triggered and kind of acting in all kinds of random directions. When you start to study astrology, you can definitely focus more. Oh yeah, I noticed this, because the more intimacy and the more, then the more possibility of that kind of wounding and that kind of jealousy and the kind of darker, negative, toxic emotions. And again, this is what often happens with our intimate partners, also our romantic partners, business partners. Could be a lot more easily triggered around our fears and vulnerabilities and sense of control than we are with our friends where we don't have that kind of hook. We don't have that kind of need for validation and all of that other stuff that we bring into other relationships that wind up, frankly, contaminating them. This is how the Scorpio energy can become very toxic. And this is why the moon is debilitated in Scorpio. Because of this potential toxic quality. But again, the transformation of that toxic quality is to not have so much desire wrapped up in the other person. Because the more desire you wrap up in the other person, and you think that some of your happiness or redemption or validation comes from them, then you're going to put all this pressure on them, just like the gopis were with Lord Krishna. Because they were so seduced by Lord Krishna's form, they thought that being next to Lord Krishna's form was so important, and then they were terrified that if they weren't next to him, then they weren't going to get their share of God. So it made them freaked out and sort of paranoid. They were missing the point, because he's saying, God is everything. God is everywhere. You are God. God is dissolved in creation. God is the sound of the flute. I am not this form. You are not that form. But they didn't hear it. They couldn't hear it. Radha, on the other hand, again, because she wasn't so wrapped up in some thing she wanted to get from Krishna, that made her vessel much more pure. So then she could hear the truth of the words without all of her desire clouding it, and she could be much closer to his teachings, especially those teachings of service, of surrender, of devotion. So it's one of the biggest ways to unlock that Scorpio devotional nature is to approach things with more discrimination, with less attachment and need for validation and all of that. So we could see a lot of this transformation as we're dealing with this full moon in Scorpio. This transformation from the potential toxic quality of Scorpio to the more devotional part. Now, the moon is also somewhat close to Jupiter, so it's sort of far away, but it's in the same sign. So it means that those more toxic qualities of Scorpio are being greatly assisted right now by Jupiter and our teachings and our higher wisdom and our gurus. So even though there could be a lot of this darker energy in the world right now, it's a great time for you to be listening to higher teaching, higher wisdom, and your gurus, and also doing the practices that take you closer to those things. And so because we're being greatly influenced by our teachers and our teachings now as well, there's a greater possibility that you can find the higher lesson in this full moon. So it's a great time for introspection, solitude, meditation, service, and devotion, and what's called bhakti now. With a lot of other things going on, Saturn, Ketu, and Sagittarius, Mars, Rahu over here, there's a lot of possibility for that to break out and to bring about our difficulty and our intensity, especially because Saturn Ketu is bringing a lot of seriousness around our teachings and this need to really focus and concentrate on them with a lot of depth. But it's also showing a lot of pressure there, where we maybe have noticed and realized how certain teachers and things that we believed in are not worth it, and that we need to change and find better teachers and better teachings to focus and concentrate on. Now with Mars and Rahu opposite and moving closer, Rahu is showing how we need to get better information. Rahu in Gemini is showing that there's more and better information coming into our life and into our mind now that's helping us to really clarify our teachings and look beyond all of the false beliefs that we had. Again, as I've been saying this for quite a while, those who are new to my channel or new can go through my videos and see where I'm talking about Rahu in Gemini. I have free 2019 forecasts where I talked about all this stuff in great length, so I don't want to keep talking about it over and over again. But this is certainly a backdrop now underneath it all, behind all of this sun, moon, and this full moon here that we're experiencing. There's certainly quite a bit of this behind it all. Let me see. I want to put a link to the, all right, here it is. So if you want to see how this full moon will influence your sign, there's a link there I just put in there. And I do these daily forecasts and also weekly forecasts, twice monthly forecasts on the full moon and the new moons, where I talk about how this will influence your sign. Because, this full moon in Scorpio is very different for Gemini, where it's falling in the 6th house, than Aries, where it's falling in the 8th house, or Virgo, where it's falling in the 3rd house, or Leo, where it's in the 4th house. All these things make it completely different and completely unique. And so if you click the link there, that will take you to a website where you can find out for yourself how the one thing that changes everything for you. And I describe what that is. You want to know what that one thing is? Check it out and watch this video, because it's very important. It shows you how you also get hours of free classes. You get this it's actually $97 value. It's a chart reading template, so you can learn how to read your chart very well using templates and whatnot that I give for my advanced students. You also get this 3-video course that I taught years ago on basically how to read the chart. I taught this at a conference, 4.5 hours. These are free classes. My friend Jeffrey Armstrong talked about how well I teach and talk about these things and bring them to light. But then I also have another course that you can get for free called Quantum Vedic Astrology, where I talk about how the science of Vedic astrology directly correlates to the brain and neuroscience and the science of matter, quantum physics. It's actually a very good overview of quantum physics as well as neuroscience and how those things are related to Vedic astrology. So you get all of that, only 50 cents if you want to try it out. 50 cents. It's pretty damn good. And you get the forecast, the full and new moon forecast for your sign and other things. So you could check that out if you want. But, again, this is a very important time right now where we're looking to transform our sort of potential for vulnerability and paranoia into something much higher. So if people have a couple questions, they can. I see Rochelle has posted many, many, many times here, so a lot of activity from Rochelle, which is great. Welcome. And I see some other people had a few comments. Best friend of Scorpio. Watch out for Saturday for emotional full moon. Says this transit has been good for a few of my friends that are all Anuradha Scorpios. That's right, Dr. Betty. It's good for sure. I mean, because the moon is getting very close, and it also means that if they have their moon there, then what's happening is the sun is opposite right now and passing through there, and it's kind of almost like they're feeling the support from that sun. Dr. Betty said Venus Sun exchange. Not really, because the sun, they would exchange if the sun, if you would have to have the sun in Libra or Taurus and Venus in Leo. That's an exchange when they're in each other's signs. So Venus is in Mars' sign, so if Mars was in Venus' sign, then they would exchange. Okay, so I've often wondered, so Rochelle used the super chat, and I wonder where that money is supposed to go. Am I supposed to get that money? Where does that go? Maybe I do, and I don't even know. It's one of those things I've never intentionally turned it on, but people pay to it sometime, and I don't know where the money goes. Did you just give money to YouTube? By the way, you don't have to give me money for the chat, but I don't know I don't even know how the super chat works. Anyway, but can someone help me read my chart? Eric, that link I just put there has these great chart reading templates that I just showed you. And again, I'll just say this because so often we want to come and, we're so used to getting the free stuff, and, someone makes them an offer, something like for 50 cents, you can get 8 hours of classes. One of it is a chart reading template where I show you systematically how you can approach reading your chart. Very valuable stuff. And we wouldn't pay 50 cents for it. Yet we say, can somebody help me? You get what you pay for in this world, just to say. So I do offer that. You can click the link, and if you actually really want to do it, you could pay 50 cents and have me show you how to read your chart using professional templates. You get 8.5 hours worth of classes for 50 cents. Pretty good deal, and that's why I make those offers, because I want people to actually study and actually learn. And again, I know we're so interested in something until someone asks us to spend literally 50 cents, and then all of a sudden, I've literally had people tell me before, that I can't afford it. 50 cents. It shows that you're just really not that interested. So I would recommend you take me up on that offer, by the way. Oh, that's okay, Dr. Betty. It's easy to get the exchanges back and forth. Part of it might be because the sun is exalted in Aries. It's easy to make that mistake. So the exchange only happens when it's in the sign, in the ruler. So Alicia said, what if Karakamsha or the sun are in Scorpio? Then they're in Scorpio, and the energy is there. So the sun in Scorpio is actually pretty good in Scorpio because it's about bringing the light. So it shows a person has a lot of depth with the sun. The moon has difficulty there because we're so emotional. And Scorpio is the pain of the emotions. It's literally the sign where we feel painful emotions. Scorpio is literally the sign of painful emotions. How the emotions feel painful. So the sun is actually, because the sun is not so emotional and it's about finding the light, it's really quite powerful there. You say Karakamsha, I don't know what planet it is, so again, I'm not sure. So now we get into everybody asking about their chart, and I get less interested because I'm not reading a chart, so I'm not going to sit here and just make statements like that. Does Scorpio have to suffer to grow spiritually? Again, Scorpio is a sign, and it's one of the signs. No one has to suffer. But again, you're saying Scorpio, So the thing to understand is that the signs have their nature. One of the things when someone is a Scorpio, like if that's, again, their sign, quote, they don't have to suffer. Nobody has to do anything. So what you want to know, again, to understand this better, we can always kind of just draw our own conclusions and start with a lot of assumptions that are mostly wrong. First of all, the karma even of what the sign is, it doesn't mean that there is any inherent quality that's destined to happen. But it does show a tendency. It shows the tendency. So Scorpio has a tendency to suffer because of their tendency. Now this gets misconstrued and turned upside down all the time, which means that Scorpio is somehow being made to suffer. Like there's something external doing something. Everything is internal. So the signs, the rashis that are ruled by the cruel planets, especially Mars and Saturn, so those 4 signs, especially Scorpio, Scorpio, Capricorn, Aquarius, Aries, often have a feeling, especially Scorpio, Capricorn, those 2 especially, that the only way to grow is to suffer. That without suffering, there's no growth. Without suffering, there's no growth. That doesn't mean it's true. That's their tendency. So that's what they bring. So most of the time, when I'm talking to people with a lot of Scorpio energy, I'm having to keep telling them to stop creating suffering because of their tendency. And by the way, this is also what can make it difficult to be around Scorpios, if you want to say that a lot, often, for a while, because their tendency to feel like all kinds of growth are going to be after some kind of conflict or some kind of emotional conflict or suffering. Again, it doesn't mean it has to be that way or that they, quote, necessarily will do that, but this is a tendency. So Mars people, like Aries, feels like that growth will come after some kind of big battle, some kind of struggle between me and someone else. There has to be a struggle between me and someone else for Aries to feel like that's the way you live life. Mars, there has to be some kind of emotional struggle in order for there to be growth. You know, like for example, I'm Gemini, which feels like in order for there to be growth, there has to be a lot of information. Let me learn and digest a whole lot of stuff. And da-da-da-da. Again, these tendencies are real, and they're also great strengths that each sign has. I just talked about the great strengths of Scorpio this whole time. Their strength is to transform that suffering into some kind of devotion. Okay? But sometimes they can just get stuck on the suffering. Sometimes they can get and feel like and project the idea that the only way to grow is to suffer, and also bring this idea that they're the ones that are willing to suffer, and that if you're not willing to suffer with them and go through it and fight with them all the time and constantly go through that, then you're somehow unworthy and you're weak, or you're somehow less than powerful or strong or whatever. And again, these are just biases that we bring. And again, I'm just talking about Scorpio because this is the sign we're talking about, but every sign has their own way of doing it. Again, just like with I use Gemini because, like, for example, I'm a Gemini. They tend to feel like, everything needs to be fun and easy. And if you're not having things be fun and easy, then there's something wrong with you. And, with Pisces, everything needs to be mergy and flowy. And if you're not mergy and flowy, if you're all about details, then you're not doing it. So we all bring these biases, and we're just looking to see which ones we're bringing. I'm talking about this now in this situation because we got the full moon in Scorpio, right? So it's a very important thing to understand about astrology, that we have these great skills and superpowers, right? the Scorpio superpower is to get in there and work through our emotional difficulty and transform it into higher awareness. But as such, we might look for things that are emotionally stressful and difficult and gravitate toward them. And even if they're not emotionally difficult, we might make them emotionally difficult because we feel like that's the way it has to be, right? It's why it's opposite Taurus, right? So it's a great skill and superpower, and also a very strong bias. We can tend to be very biased toward that if that's our chart, for example, if someone is the Scorpio or is the other thing. So you want to see it both ways, right? So the planet in the sign is going to have that power and also that bias to tend to see it that way. And not just ascendant or moon, but all planets. All of them are like that. That's always what I'm talking about even in this chart with the Ketu Saturn in Sagittarius. It's all holistic. Saturn is what we're focusing on and what we're trying to focus on and be committed to. Sagittarius is our teachings, what inspires us. So you bring these two things together and see how, and then there's like an evolutionary process that happens. We want to focus on things that inspire us, but in order to be inspired, we have to destroy some things that aren't inspiring, so that we can focus better. And it's a whole kind of thing that we have to be intelligent about. Okay, so I see just Rochelle with a lot of comments here, and I'm looking, and it's great you're so involved. I'm also just looking to see if people have some more questions. Just kind of looking to see here. Someone says, "Yeah, Scorpio Sun's best friends, loyal friends ever," and I think it was Christine that asked a question about the Scorpio. Karna from Mahabharata is a good embodiment of Mahabharata, or of Anuradha, says Sebastian. Yeah, exactly, Karna. And Angela says, did Radha ever get to merge? Well, these aren't ultimate states, for the most part. Her merging was just like your merging can be right now. And then you might come back from the merge. We're all at a state of merging, or in a certain degree of merging, right? So she definitely experienced a lot of that bliss and devotion and bhakti. So people should try to do spiritual practices that connect them to the heart. And I'm not just saying thinking about things or latching onto ideas, even ideas like this, which are good ideas. Bhakti and devotion are practices. You literally are, for example, singing kirtan and devotional practices, pujas and service. And again, kirtan is a great one. They connect you with the bhav, as it's called, with the feeling of merging with God. So again, to say, did she ever get to merge like it's some ultimate state? That's a state. And ultimately, Radha became liberated. But there are different levels of how that's discussed. And again, this is one facet. There's also different levels, like, Radha and Krishna are a pair, just like Sita and Rama. They're as much metaphoric as they are literal. But her joining with Krishna was almost like the sun and the moon. It's literally a embodiment of the sun and the moon. Krishna is the power of the sun, and Radha is the moon, the creative principle of the moon, of the harmonizing of the energy. Just like Sita and Ram, Radha Krishna, Sita Rama. And you notice when they say Sita Rama, they say the woman first. Radha Krishna. Like when they're talked about, it's Radha Krishna, Sita Rama. The female is first. Sita Ram, 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 Sita Ram. Sita Ram 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 Sita Ram Sita Ram 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 Sita Ram. That's some high living when you're chanting the names of God like that. Because then you're immersed in the devotion, in the devotional practices. That's why people do these practices. And when you're singing Sita Ram 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 Sita Ram Sita Ram 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 Sita Ram, you're basically singing. It's like masculine, feminine, man, woman, sun, moon. And what you're doing when you chant these kind of, especially those kind, Sita Ram, Radha Krishna, is you're uniting the masculine and feminine within. You're uniting masculine and feminine. I did a recent broadcast about this Mars in Gemini and how Gemini is the embodiment of the masculine and feminine. It's literally called Maituna, and it's a very masculine man and a very feminine woman. That's what Gemini is. So we're going to have a lot of planets going through Gemini. We have Rahu in Gemini. Mars is in Gemini. Sun's going to be going through. All these planets are going to be going through Gemini. And it's a time to really unite this masculine, feminine, and this sort of apparent opposite that's always pulling. And so these energies are there. Yeah, Christine said Ida and Pingala. Absolutely. All of these things, all of this chanting and all of this stuff is meant to evoke and unlock yogic secrets, scientific yoga secrets. All of the stories of Radha and Krishna, of Sita and Rama. And they're all cosmological, they're all astrological, cosmological in nature. They're all about the cosmology and the astrology, but mainly the cosmology, because cosmology is above astrology. Astrology is interpreting natal charts, like in the moment. Like I'm doing astrology right here, talking about this planet in this sign and different techniques to interpret it. That's astrology. But above astrology is cosmology, which is how the cosmos is laid out. The deities, the yugas, the way energy arranges itself from the undifferentiated Shiva state to the dance of Maya and the influence of karma to create this separate creature, and all the yogic practices that align us with all of that cosmological energy. And all the deities and all that. When you start to understand this cosmology, that we come from the cosmos, this is also where all the nakshatra energy comes from and how relevant all those stories are and all this stuff. Then you understand all of that is universal. And again, you probably hear me say this a lot, people that listen to my channel, but we focus way too much on our own individual chart, obsess over that stuff. It's the least important part of astrology. The most important is the cosmology, that you understand how the cosmos is laid out, because that's what connects you to your divine being. You're so worried about you, and then you focus way too much on your chart. Well, you're just reinforcing your limitation at that point. And of course it's helpful to know, but the part of it that's helpful isn't because then somebody can focus on your limitation. It's so they can take your limitation and put it in a higher context. That's why, that's the benefit of taking your limited chart and having someone who understands the cosmology explain it to you in a larger context. It's like, look, this part of you that you think is just this big, it's just this little thing that you're just obsessed with, is actually part of this much larger thread. And so I would take that much larger thread and pull on that so that you would go, oh, okay, whoa, this is what it is? So that's the most important part of the cosmology. So someone's asking about a friend's baby possibly born. full moon effects. Again, it's a lot. I don't know the time. Folks, I know you want these kinds of answers, but astrology doesn't work that way. I don't know the sign. I don't know what the ascendant is. It doesn't work like that. And again, the baby possibly born on tomorrow's full moon affects, like, I don't know. So I just spent all this time talking about the full moon. So that's a general tendency. You must have some idea what that might mean based on how much information is being exchanged here. So anyway, Christine said, I started your classes. I want to grow. Yay, Christine. Yes, you did. There's a lot of people that are getting trained now that want to really understand these things. And that's the reason to study astrology. The reason to study it is to study this higher wisdom, is to really study. These are the facets of your higher nature and your higher consciousness. You know, I'll say this last thing, and I talk about it in the material that I send people when they might be interested in studying, is that we don't even think it's possible to know or to learn what astrology teaches us. You know, do you remember back when you were, the earliest memories you have of even being alive, when you were a little kid? The earliest memories. I remember mine. I grew up in Pasadena, Maryland, back in the woods, right? The nearest store was 10 miles away, right? Very rural. And I remember I used to look up in the sky and just amazing, because it was also down by the water. We would go down by the water sometime, and the sky was black. There were hardly any street lights. And you look up in the sky, was just endless stars. Just remembering, like, with a sense of wonder about what is this universe? Like, what am I? First of all, who am I? What am I? What is all of this? Like, what is this? And there was a time when we didn't have some calculated answer. We had no idea. And actually, you might not remember this, but you actually thought that your parents knew. And then after a while, you realized, well, no, they don't know. And then maybe teachers or other smart, intelligent people, maybe they had the answer. Maybe they knew. But then they didn't know either. Then maybe religion. You know, maybe they know what this is and who am I. And they don't know either. And so we just stop even thinking that we're ever going to find the answer. So we just give up. We just give up. At some point we're like, well, we're never going to figure this out. It's too much to know. It's too much to ever figure out. Mankind and human beings are not meant to know how it works. We're not meant to know it. So we just have to believe in something. We have to believe in some religion. We have to believe in something. And this is kind of where we're all left. But we forgot that we even asked the question. We forgot we ever had this sense of wonder, that we actually wanted to know how it all works. And the truth is that astrology, especially Vedic astrology, actually answers the question. Vedic and Indian teachings show us these things. They show us exactly how spirit comes down from form, or I'm sorry, how spirit descends down into form based on our karma. We have something like an astrology chart which shows specifically what that karma is. But then again, that limited energy, which this is so vast, this astrology chart has so much meaning and so deep if you know how to read it. But then even beyond that, all of that, which is our individual nature, is connected to something that's as transcendent and cosmic as you could ever imagine. Anyone who's ever studied Advaita Vedanta, who's ever studied any kind of like Kashmir Shaivism, or the most enlightened thinking that you could ever find, you know, like all of the, you know, like I say, Advaita Vedanta, and even things like the neuroscience and the quantum physics and how all of this leads to just pure mind-blowing cosmic energy, understands that the Indians had all of that, they understood all of that. And the real science that teaches how it works, not just kind of what it is, but how it works, is Vedic astrology. You can actually know that. You can actually know not just who you are, but who you are as a cosmic divine being and how it works, and watch it work. Watch the magic in real time. Watch the cosmic energy happening in real time. So it's not just something that you kind of believe in somehow, and that you got to just sort of have some belief system about it, but that you have no understanding of how your belief system even works. No, with Vedic astrology, there's still a belief system there, but the belief is supported by all of this research and actual data and facts that you can test, that you test over and over again, that is used to unfold consciousness in your mind and body through yoga and Ayurveda and all of these other practices. So this is all built into why people study Vedic astrology. This is why they study it with me, because this is how I teach it. This is what I teach. And it's right from the pure source. It's right from all of the classic Vedic astrology and yogic texts. It's all right there. You just have to know how to interpret it, and just know how to read it. It's in very plain language if somebody knows what they're reading. It's very concentrated and very dense. And if you don't understand it, it's going to go over your head. But if you do, it's the whole, keys to the cosmos laid out right there. So that's why I spend all this time doing these kinds of things and giving away a lot of classes for practically free, like 50 cents or something. You can get all this stuff because I want people to understand what it is. And in those classes that I talked about earlier for 50 cents, I go through and explain all of this cosmology in great detail. That this is how all this stuff works. And then you get into reading charts and doing all the specific stuff later. But, we don't even understand what we don't understand. And we have all kinds of ideas about what's happening in the universe, even ideas about karma and all this other stuff that's just, they're not even correct. And in fact, it's often destructive to have a wrong idea about that stuff. It's better to not have any idea than to have the wrong idea about certain things. It's also, by the way, why I wrote this book. A lot of it is in this book, if you're interested. Again, it's book. It's like $20 or something, But explaining these things so that people understand what they're in the middle of and how it works. I did put the link again to the website if you're interested. Go back and see. There's a few other. Someone says about, the strong Jupiter, you recognize a good teaching when you hear it. Yep, Sebastian's been listening to me for a while. This has been one of the things I've said for a long time. We get a lot of teachings. We have a lot of beliefs. You can really tell by the dignity of Jupiter, also the ninth house ruler, but Jupiter is very pure. That we come in contact with so many teachings, and when Jupiter is powerful, especially pure, you recognize the good teaching when you hear it. You're like, oh, okay, that's right. And someone says, see, someone's not keeping it to its root, authentic Jyotish, if they follow tropical for Vedic. Yeah, you're right. That's definitely off for sure. No, that's not in any of the Jyotish texts. And, just because you can find a couple statements here and there that might seem to indicate something else does not mean that by any means that's how Vedic astrology was supposed to be practiced. You can see it very clearly because at the beginning of all the Jyotish texts, they define the zodiac very clearly first. Before they talk about anything, any techniques or anything, they say, here's the zodiac. Planets move through nakshatras. Nakshatras start with Ashwini, and then the Rashis beginning with Aries occupy the same space. Very clear. Other things that also indicate sidereal space, and other ones are, they make it very clear. Ashwini, Aries, 9 nakshatrapadas, 27 nakshatras, Navamsha chart, all this stuff, there's no debate. And those statements fall at the beginning of the book. So again, you just should understand, those statements at the beginning are meant to start, they show the structure first. So the structure is established by establishing the sky. Then you start talking about things like the rulers and all of these techniques. Those techniques are to be applied to the calculation. That's why the calculation comes first. So you know what you're doing. You don't start giving all these instructions before you describe what you're applying the instructions toward. So again, these things are very basic. So those who have screwed this up, it's just, again, it doesn't bother me that people want to do that. If they want to do it, they can do it. I don't care. I'm not the astrology police. The part that upsets me about it is that it confuses so many students who don't have a good Jupiter, who can't see through it, who don't just go, wait a minute, this doesn't. So when you see that kind of teaching and you see people falling into that stuff, try to gently remind them that, this doesn't make much sense. And I have a lot of videos that explain this. So, again, I don't care if people want to say that or do it. I don't like it. I don't like the false statements, though, and especially because it then confuses people. And so anyway, I'm here to try to help people learn and give them the purest version of the truth and the most authentic and honest version of it that I can bring up. So it's very easy to see, especially things like this where there's no, especially like with zodiacs, there's just no tropical moment ever. All the way back to literally 1500 BC, it was sidereal all the way through. So anyway, no reputable scholars have ever said this either, so there's just no point. By the way, I'm finishing a book on this that I'm going to have out very soon called A Concise History of the Zodiacs. I'm getting it edited right now, so all that'll be happening. But anyway, I'm glad people have showed up. Gone a little long. I'm gonna say goodbye now because it's been a long call, and I hope that everyone has a good weekend, and that the full moon in Scorpio leads you to greater devotion, greater bhakti, and more of those qualities of Radha, Krishna, Sita Rama, and that unification of the heart and mind in that spirit of devotion. So you have a good weekend, and we'll be in touch. Share this video with others if you think they'll like it too.